What what is going on, everybody? I am back today. Took a took a little bit of a break. I am back. Um, Today's episode will be an hour plus. So I would highly suggest getting a meal or a snack or multiple snacks, however, with you. So here we go, guys.
Welcome back, guys, to Mr. Skeleton. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about creepy legend encounters in California. Each story carries that eerie mix of folklore and real-life terror that lingers with you, long after the story ends. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start.
Enjoy.
I just moved out of my parents' place in Belmont and figured the fastest way to stay afloat was transferring to Darnell County Community College. Rent in this city was way too much, and I wasn't about to move back into my old room and feel like a high schooler again. My cousin Maddie offered a solution, said I could stay with her and her dad, Hank, on their property just outside Everlyn. It wasn't glamorous, but it was free, and I wasn't in a position to be picky. The place was isolated. A single-story house that looked like it had been put there in the 60s and then promptly forgotten. Paint peeled from the siding in long curls. The front porch sagged just enough to feel like a warning. Beyond it, acres of brittle land stretched out in every direction, broken only by rows of grapevines that hadn't produced in years. Just dried, claw-like stems and dust. Still, I was grateful. Hank didn't ask for rent, just said I should help around when I could, fix a fence, clear some brush, make sure the pipes didn't freeze.
Lily, she's my hero. A lot of people don't get to meet theirs. Mine calls me Dad.
And Maddie was chill, easy to be around, though she kept a weird sort of distance when it came to the house. She didn't go out back much. Never near the ditch that cut through the edge of the property, what everyone in town called the channel. It wasn't even impressive. Just a shallow, winding depression in the dirt. No water, no growth, just dry earth, maybe a foot deep, like an old scar left by a river that got bored and wandered off. I thought it was nothing, but the locals didn't. First day I stopped at the gas station, the old man at the register asked where I was staying. When I told him Hank's place off Holleridge Road, he just said, "That land's thin." I asked him what that meant, and he just stared like I should already know. Then he said, "If you hear it at night, keep your damn mouth shut." People kept saying stuff like that. Don't whistle back, don't step in it barefoot, don't let it know your name. It was kind of funny at first. Felt like the town had its own urban legend, and everyone was in on the joke. Except it never really felt like they were joking. Even Hank had rules. He didn't say much, not out of rudeness, just not a talker. But one evening, when I asked if the stories were true, he just looked out the kitchen window for a second and said, "If you hear anything from the channel after dark, lock the door, stay inside." That was it. Then he went back to slicing potatoes like he hadn't just dropped a line from a horror movie. Still, nothing happened for a while. First week, everything was fine. I'd go to class during the day, help with stuff around the house, binge some dumb shows with Maddie in the evenings. I slept like a rock. The quiet out there was unreal. But then small things started going missing. At first, I didn't even notice. My flashlight wasn't on my desk. Then my charger was gone. Then one of my sneakers, just one, like the world's most annoying prank. I figured I'd misplaced them. But then Maddie started having the same issue. She accused me, half joking, of messing with her keys. I hadn't touched them. And she knew it. There was this weird tension that settled in, like we were both waiting for the other to admit something neither of us had done. Then one night, I heard it. Not the whistle, not yet, just the locks, clicking, one by one. It was about midnight, and I was still up, scrolling on my phone when I heard the front door, then the back, then the windows. I got up, opened my door, and peeked into the hallway. Hank was moving through the house with a crowbar in one hand and this glass jar in the other. It looked old. The kind of thing you'd find in a box of dusty jars at a garage sale. He'd dip his fingers into it, smear something thick and dark over the door frames and window ledges. His face didn't look scared, just focused. Focused. Like this was something he'd done before, something routine. The next morning, Maddie asked him what it was. He didn't skip a beat. Said, just keeping the house in the living, then left. We didn't ask again. That's when the whistling started. It was 3:05 in the morning. 3 notes, always the same. Low, sharp, high. Then silence. 15 minutes later, it happened again. Then nothing. The first night, I convinced myself it was an animal, some bird maybe, or wind through the trees. But it happened again the next night, and the one after that. Always at the same time, always the same notes. There were no birds out there, no trees, no houses close enough for it to be a prank. Every time I looked, all I saw were those empty vines and the outline of the channel, a darker line against the dirt. Then came the dirt. That was when things changed. Maddie screamed one morning. I ran into her room, and she was standing on her bed, staring down. There was a ring of loose soil all around her bed. Not random, not spilled. A perfect, intentional circle. We told Hank. He looked at it for maybe a second and said, "It found a way in, didn't explain, didn't offer advice." Just walked out the front door and sat in his truck for the rest of the day. That night, he didn't come in. Parked the truck facing the house, headlights on, shotgun across his knees. He didn't sleep. I know because I kept looking out the window, and every time, he was still there, eyes on the porch, lips moving like he was praying. He kept repeating something under his breath in Spanish. I didn't catch most of it, just one word stuck. Brujeria, witchcraft. Maddie called the sheriff, said someone was stalking the house, messing with us. He came out, took some notes, looked at the dirt ring like he'd seen it before. Didn't seem shocked. Said that land had a bad streak. People moving in and then suddenly moving out, sometimes in the middle of the night. Fires, vanishings, all that. Get some cameras, he said. Then left. We couldn't afford cameras. So we got a motion light from the hardware store and stuck it up over the back porch. It started going off the same night we installed it. 3:07. Light floods the backyard. Nothing's there. Then the whistle. Low, sharp, high. Always from the direction of the channel. And always followed by that thick, pressing silence. One morning, Hank was just gone. Truck still there, door open, keys still in the ignition, shotgun untouched. Like he'd stepped out for a second and never came back. We waited until noon. Then we checked the property. Then we called hospitals. Filed a report. But in our guts, we knew. 2 days later, Maddie saw them first. Grooves in the dirt. Not footprints, just 2 long indentations, parallel, starting from the side of the truck and dragging off toward the channel. And then nothing, just open land. We left that night, threw what we could into the back of her car and drove until the tank was nearly empty. Ended up crashing at her friend's place in Lariston. We didn't sleep much, kept the lights on, jumped at every noise. Back at the house, no one wanted it. Eventually the bank took over. It was sold to a couple from Redwood Hills. They lasted 4 weeks. Then another family. They stayed just under 3. The last time we checked Google Maps, the image of the house was blurred. Not the whole neighborhood, just that one spot. Every other house clear as day. But that one, just a smudge. Like something didn't want to be seen. Maddie never went back, still won't talk about it. She gets sleep paralysis sometimes. Says she hears whistling just before she wakes up. 3 notes, outside the window. As for me, I try to forget. But some nights I'll wake up at exactly 3:05. No sound, just a wrongness in the air, like the room is waiting for something. Like the land remembers. Maybe once you've heard it, that's it. Maybe it doesn't matter where you go, just that you heard it once. Low, sharp, high. If you ever hear it too, don't answer. Don't follow. And for God's sake, don't leave the door open.
And action.
Very exciting. We're on set with a new Swiss tourism ad with Hollywood icon.
I was 15 when I first heard about a place everyone in town called Hollow Creek. Just another stretch of dry land tucked behind the hills near Whitlow. They said the creek bed changed, not like after a storm or over years of erosion, but in real time, day to day, sometimes even hour to hour. Paths would twist in new directions, walls would appear where there had been none, turns you could have sworn led one way now dumped you out somewhere else entirely. Most adults didn't buy it. They called it small-town superstition, desert heat messing with people's heads. But even if they didn't believe it, they didn't exactly encourage anyone to go out there either. I didn't really believe it either. Not at first. That summer, right before school started back up, a few of us decided to go check it out. You know, one of those, we'll prove it's nothing kind of things. Just another dare, basically. There were 6 of us. Bored, restless kids looking for something to make us feel alive. We had no plan, no gear, just backpacks, water, and way too much misplaced confidence. Among us was a kid named Rook. That wasn't his real name, but that's what everyone called him. And honestly, it fit. He was kind of a wild card, didn't talk much, moved in a way that made him hard to read. Some people treated him like he was slow, like he didn't quite get things. But those of us who really knew him understood that he saw stuff we missed. He'd spot weird details no one else noticed. A shift in the trail, a fresh mark in the dirt, the tiniest change in how a branch bent or a rock leaned. He had a sharpness you didn't see until you paid attention. We trusted him, probably more than we should have. We set out early, before the heat got bad, and hiked past the outskirts of Whitlow. Once the last row of houses dropped out of view, it felt like we were in another world. The hills rolled out wide and empty, all dry grass and sunburned stone. The creek wasn't hard to find. It cut into the land like something had clawed a trench through it, deep and wide and strangely quiet. No water, no sound, just this hollow groove that went on farther than we could see. We slid down into it, and right away everything felt muted. No birds, no wind. Just us, our footsteps, and the crunch of dry dirt. The walls rose higher than I expected. At some points, they blocked out the sky completely. The heat clung to the rocks, and the air felt tight, like it didn't want to move. We dumped our bags near a cluster of flat stones and split up, staying close but not too close. Rook darted ahead as usual. He had this bounce in his step, like the place made him come alive. He pointed out animal tracks, weirdly shaped pebbles, broken branches with fresh bends. He kept vanishing around corners and reappearing farther down, waving at us to catch up. Then he didn't reappear. We waited, laughed a little. Figured he was hiding. Classic Rook move. Probably crouched behind a rock somewhere, grinning, waiting to jump out and scare the hell out of us. We called his name. Nothing. Shouted louder. Still nothing. We walked around the next bend, expecting to see him crouched behind something ready to pop up. But the creek was empty. We kept walking, calling his name, trying not to sound worried. It was quiet. Unnaturally quiet. That's when things started to feel off. We decided to split up in pairs, thinking maybe he'd wandered down a side path we hadn't noticed. But the farther we went, the more the place stopped making sense. Turns that should have led back to the main trail curved into dead ends. Open spaces suddenly had walls where there'd been none. A narrow ledge now stretched where we remembered bare rock. One path that had been a gentle slope turned into a drop. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was wrong. We climbed out of the bed at one point, trying to get a better view from above. From up top, it looked the same. A long, shallow crack in the land. Nothing special, nothing weird. But when we dropped back in, everything had shifted again. The stretch we just left had vanished. In its place were steep dirt walls and a bend that none of us remembered passing. It was like the ground was folding itself differently each time we blinked. We called for Rook until our throats went raw. Started marking the walls with rocks and sticks, trying to track where we'd been. But the marks didn't help. They vanished or turned up in the wrong places. By mid-afternoon, we were dusty, tired, sunburnt, and scared, in a way none of us wanted to admit. We huddled near a crooked ledge and tried to make a plan, but no one had any ideas. Eventually, we left. There was nothing else to do. Telling his parents was the worst part. We stammered through it, stumbling over details, trying to sound rational when we felt anything but. We said he wandered too far, that we'd lost him. We didn't mention the shifting paths or the impossible walls. We knew how that would sound. The town responded fast. Search parties covered the hills. Helicopters buzzed the ridges. Dogs sniffed through the dust. Men with radios and bright vests walked side by side through the brush. Nothing. No trace. No sign. Just silence. And then, life went on. Except for us, it didn't. Even years later, Rook hung around in the back of my mind. Whenever I ran into someone from that group, we'd eventually circle back to him. Quietly. Like we didn't want to wake something up. Most people settled on the explanation. He got lost, the heat got to him, maybe he fell and couldn't get up. That's what the adults believed. But we'd been right there. He was just ahead of us. One bend away. And then he was gone. Time dragged me forward. College. A job, marriage, kids. I built a life I cared about, but that absence never really left. It didn't haunt me exactly, it just sat there, like an unfinished sentence. Then one summer, while visiting family in Whitlow, my dad mentioned something over breakfast. Just this offhand comment between bites of toast. Construction crews were digging out Muir Hollow Creek, new development going in. While excavating, they found bones. I didn't even breathe. I just stared at my dad like I already knew what he was about to say. They identified the remains. It was Rook, no question. The coroner said there were no signs of foul play, no damage. Probably natural causes. Maybe he got trapped under a slide, buried by shifting soil. Something simple, something neat. But we'd been there, minutes behind him. We'd searched every inch. There was no way. The creek had taken him. Before they paved over the land, I went back. Just once. The place looked smaller, broken, half filled with debris and torn up earth, like someone had tried to erase it. When I finished, I turned back to the car and left.
Do not pay your next car insurance bill. Repeat, do not pay your next bill yet. So I found this website.
Back then, I was working the overnight shift at a warehouse just outside Auburn, midnight to 6. Not the worst job I'd had, but the hours screwed with my sleep, and the drive home wasn't exactly short. I lived about 45 minutes out, in a little town most people passed without noticing. The kind of place with one gas station, no stoplights, and too many stray dogs. Most nights I took the freeway. It was faster, better lit, and I didn't have to think. But sometimes, especially when my brain was wired from too much vending machine coffee, I'd take the back roads. They were quieter. No headlights blinding you. No semis riding your bumper. Just fields, orchards, and the occasional deer. That night, it was almost 3 in the morning when I turned off onto Prairie Road. It ran behind the old citrus farms and looped around toward the edge of town. A little slower, yeah, but peaceful. Familiar. Not long after I turned onto that stretch, I passed the fruit stand. I'd seen it 100 times. It was one of those hand-built wooden stalls with faded red paint and a sun-bleached sign that used to say Valley Fresh Peaches or something like that. No one had sold anything there in years. The roof sagged, one of the support beams had fallen in, and the vines had basically claimed the whole thing. I didn't usually notice it anymore. But that night, just after I passed it, I saw a car. A pale blue sedan, parked weirdly on the shoulder, half in the gravel, nose angled toward the ditch. Its headlights were still on, and I could see the engine exhaust puffing faint clouds into the cold air. I slowed down. At first I thought maybe someone had broken down or pulled over to sleep, which wasn't totally unusual out there. Cell service was garbage in that stretch, and if you hit a nail or ran out of gas, it could be a long walk to anywhere. I pulled up behind the car, flipped on my hazard lights, and parked. Didn't see anyone through the back window. I got out, left my door open, and walked up to the driver's side. The engine was still idling, steady and low. The lights cast long beams into the field. Doors were shut, windows up. I knocked lightly on the glass. No movement inside, so I leaned closer and cupped my hands to the driver's window to block the glare. Then I turned on my flashlight. The driver's seat was empty, passenger seat too. No jacket on the headrest, no purse or backpack. Just the standard old interior, clean but kind of worn. I checked the back seat. Nothing. It struck me as strange but not alarming. My first guess was the driver had gone off to find help. There were a few properties within walking distance, even if they weren't visible from the road. Still, something felt off. Why leave the car running? Why lock the doors? I circled the car slowly, shining the light along the edges. No damage. Tires looked fine. No sign of a struggle or accident. And yet, that feeling stayed with me, like I was missing something obvious. I wrote down the license plate number on a sticky note I had in the glove box, just in case someone reported it later. Got back in my truck and pulled away, watching the sedan shrink in the rear view until it was just two bright dots on the shoulder. I didn't think about it again until a few minutes later when I stopped at a gas station for coffee. It was about 2 miles up the road, the only thing open between the highway and town. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed. It was Mateo, one of the guys from the warehouse. He was finishing his shift a little later than me and usually took the same back roads. He asked if I'd seen a car parked near the old fruit stand. I said, yeah, blue sedan, headlights on. Then there was this long pause. He said, there was someone in it when I passed. I remember the exact way he said it. Not like he was spooked, but like he was trying to make sure I wasn't messing with him. I told him the car was empty when I looked. He sounded confused, then quiet. She was in the driver's seat, he said. Head down, like she was passed out or worse. Something in his voice made my stomach turn. I didn't ask more questions. I just turned around and drove back. Didn't even grab the coffee. The drive felt longer going back. My palms were sweaty on the wheel. When I pulled up, the scene had changed. The sedan was still there, but the driver's side door was wide open now, and there she was. A woman, maybe early 60s, slumped halfway out of the car. One leg hung out onto the gravel, her torso twisted awkwardly, leaning toward the passenger seat like she'd just collapsed sideways. Her hair was gray and matted. She was wearing a pale cardigan, the kind that looked hand-knitted, with little embroidered flowers near the collar. I hesitated before stepping closer. Then I crouched down beside her and touched her wrist. It was ice cold. Her arm didn't move. Her skin had that waxy stiffness you only see on bodies that have been gone a while. I stood up quickly and stepped back, heart hammering in my ears. Called 911 and waited near my truck. 15 minutes later, highway patrol showed up, lights flashing. Then came the ambulance, though it didn't seem like there was much they could do. One of the officers came over to talk to me while the paramedics checked her. He asked what I'd seen, and I told him. Said I'd checked the car maybe 30 minutes before and there had been no one inside. He didn't say much, just nodded and took notes, but I could tell he was skeptical. Are you sure you didn't miss her? He asked. She was slumped forward. Might have been hard to see. I swore I looked. Used a flashlight. Circled the whole car. I wasn't guessing. He didn't press further, but his expression didn't change. Later that day, I got a call from a detective. He asked if I'd be willing to come by the station. Said they'd found something he thought I should see. I went in after lunch. He had me sit down and pull up a video on his computer, grainy footage from a traffic camera mounted just down the road. It showed me pulling in behind the sedan, walking around it, flashlight in hand. Clear as day. You could see the beams sweep through both front windows. No one was inside. Not the driver's seat. Not the passenger side. The woman wasn't there. He ran it twice, slow and steady. She just wasn't there. Then he told me something else. The coroner had estimated her time of death somewhere around 10 p.m. She'd been dead for hours before I even showed up. And based on the signs, lever mortis, skin tone, posture, she'd been in that upright position in the car for most of it, which didn't make sense, because she hadn't been in the car when I checked. Not unless I missed something that obvious, but I hadn't. There wasn't much else to say after that. No signs of trauma, no drugs, no fingerprints that didn't belong. Just a woman who should have been there the whole time, but wasn't. The report listed it as natural causes. No foul play. Case closed. But the story got out fast. Truckers, warehouse crews, third shift folks, they all heard it. Some said it was the lady in blue. Said she'd been spotted before over the years. Sitting in parked cars, showing up in mirrors, standing near the old fruit stand around dawn. A local nurse swore she saw someone like her on the roadside a year earlier, staring straight ahead with her hands folded in her lap. No one believed her then. Others just called it a glitch, or a ghost, or a bad night's sleep. I don't really know what it was. All I know is what I saw, and what I didn't see until it was already too late. Now, when I'm driving those roads and spot a car pulled over, especially anything pale blue, I don't stop, not even to look. I keep my eyes on the lane.
No one does food like Puerto Rico, whether it's a chef tasting menu or a local favorite spot with no.
I've been driving north along the coast, just past a little town called Cypress Glen, after spending the day in Fairpoint with an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We'd caught up over crab rolls and weirdly sweet iced tea at some boardwalk place, and I ended up staying longer than planned. By the time I hit the road, it was late, close to midnight, and the stretch of Highway 49 that runs along the cliffs was almost empty. It felt like I was the only person left driving that night. You know that feeling? When it's just your headlights, your engine, and the road, like the rest of the world has gone to sleep and forgotten to invite you? That was me, weaving along the curbs with the Pacific somewhere off to my left, completely swallowed by the dark. No stars, no moon, just me and the occasional reflector dot flashing by. I wasn't even that tired, just a little zoned out. Still had music playing, still had half a bottle of gas and a bottle of water in the passenger seat. But I figured I'd pull over for a few minutes, stretch my legs, check my phone for signal, maybe drink some water without sloshing it all over myself while driving. There was this wide dirt turnout, the kind that looks like it used to be something, but now it's just gravel and weeds and a busted guardrail leaning out toward the drop. No signage, no trash cans, no lights. Just a faded tire path leading off the edge of the highway. I pulled in slow, killed the music, and left the engine idling. It was quiet. No cars behind me. No lights ahead. Just the soft purr of the engine and the occasional ping of the cooling exhaust. I grabbed my phone to check the time and maybe look at the map. Tapped the screen. Nothing. Pressed the side button. Still black. Okay, weird, but maybe it had died, except I remembered seeing it at 20% a few minutes ago. I held the button down, gave it a shake. It buzzed weakly in my hand like it was trying to start up, but the screen stayed dark. Then I looked back at the dash. The digital clock, blank. The radio display, also dead. Just a soft static coming through the speakers, like an old TV left between channels. And yet, the engine was still running, smooth and steady, like nothing had changed. No warning lights, no stuttering, no check engine alert, just this creeping disconnect between the stuff I could hear and the stuff I could see. It wasn't even scary at that point, just confusing. I started running through basic explanations. Maybe a fuse blew out something connected to the battery, but then the headlights worked fine. The turn signal clicked normally. It didn't add up. I rolled the window down and leaned out to get some air. Immediately noticed something else. There was no sound outside. I mean none. Not, oh, it's a calm night. Silence. This was absence of everything silence. No wind rustling the brush. No insects buzzing. No distant crash of the waves, even though I knew they were right below the cliffs. It felt artificial, like someone had turned off the ambient track in a video game. I held my breath to listen harder and almost laughed when my ears started ringing from the effort, the kind of ringing you get in a soundproof room where your own heartbeat becomes the only thing you can hear. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty. I opened the door, stood up slowly, and stretched until my spine popped. The gravel crunched under my boots in this sharp, echoey way that made me flinch. Sounded too loud, like it didn't belong. And that's when I saw it. A light. Down the road, maybe 50 or 60 yards, just past the next curve. A pale bluish glow, dim and flickering like it was coming through water. It moved slightly, swaying side to side in these slow, hypnotic arcs. At first I thought it was a phone flashlight, maybe someone walking with it, but there was no bounce, no shadow shifting. Just this rhythmic sway, like it was tethered to something. I stared at it for a while, trying to figure out what could make that kind of light move like that. Then the glow dimmed, just a little, came back, dimmed again. It looked like it was breathing. And then I saw the shape. Something crossed the road near the light. It wasn't a person, too tall, way too tall, but thin, almost delicate, like its arms and legs were longer than they should have been. And it didn't walk, it slid. Each movement was wrong in this quiet way. No sound, no break in the rhythm. It just floated from one side of the road to the other, covering ground way faster than it should have. My whole body went cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe, Just stood there with the door open, leaning against it, watching this thing glide under the faint pulsing blue. For some reason, my brain whispered my grandfather's voice. He used to tell these spooky little stories when I was a kid. Local legends mostly. One of them was about something called the Tall One. Said it lived near a cliffside town called Rose Lake, and it came out on silent nights when the fog didn't roll in. He said it didn't walk. Said it looked for people who stopped driving, who got out to stretch or pee or take pictures. He'd laugh afterward like it was just a dumb ghost story. But that voice came back to me then, real clear, like he was standing right behind me. Tall One's got long arms, real long. If you see it move sideways, don't follow it. I didn't plan to follow it. But I stepped forward just a little, just enough to see past the edge of the car door, and the second I shifted my weight, everything dropped. Not physically. More like that moment when you realize you missed the last step on a staircase and your body goes weightless for a second. My stomach dropped to my knees. My arms tingled. Everything flipped inside out and went black. No sound, no sensation, no fear. Just gone. And then I blinked. I was back in the driver's seat, both hands on the wheel. Seatbelt fastened. Engine still running. The radio was playing soft static again, but the display was back. The dash clock read 5:07. Outside, the ocean roared like normal. Waves, gulls, distant wind whipping through the brush. Everything was back. But I wasn't in the same place. This turnout was paved, with a metal picnic bench and a faded hiking sign pointing toward a trail I didn't recognize. I looked around, hoping to see something familiar. Nothing. No sign of the glowing light. No bend in the road. I reached for my water jug. The lid was off. It sat neatly on the passenger seat like someone had unscrewed it carefully. The jug itself was empty, completely drained. But the fabric underneath, bone dry. I hadn't spilled it. Someone or something had taken the time to open it and pour it out. My backpack had moved too. I always keep it in the passenger seat. Now it was behind me, wedged awkwardly on the floor like it had been tossed there in a hurry. I didn't feel scared. I just felt wrong, like something had reached into my night and rearranged the parts. I drove the rest of the way home on autopilot. Had to pull over twice just to breathe, just to make sure the road was solid under my tires. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my phone again. The battery was fine now. I checked the GPS timeline. Everything after midnight? Gone. Clean gap between 12:14 and 5:07. No stops logged. No location pins. Just a 5-hour hole where I should have been driving. I didn't even know how to explain it to myself. I tried to write it off as stress, sleep deprivation, something rational, but I kept coming back to one detail: the van. Right before I'd blacked out, I saw a white utility van parked backward along the opposite turnout, hazard lights dimly blinking. It hadn't been there when I pulled over, but when I came to, it was there again, exact same angle, same blinking pattern, same distance from the guardrail, like time had paused around it. That's what stuck with me. That one real-world detail I couldn't pin on a dream. Later, I looked up everything I could about California's lesser-known folklore. Not just the big urban legends, the weird, quiet ones. Found forums, old Reddit threads, historical archives. People describing the same silence, the same dead electronics, the same glowing blue light near cliffs and isolated roads. They called it the Lantern Man, the Tall One, the Watcher of Ridgeline. Different names, same story. And always someone waking up somewhere they didn't drive to with no memory of the gap in between. I don't know what I saw out there. I don't know what crossed the road or poured out my water or buckled my seatbelt, but I know it wasn't just a story.
Nobody likes a cracked windshield.
What was that?
No.
But you can go to safelight.com and get it fixed now and pay later.
Awesome.
SafeLight can come to you for free. Don't wait. Get it fixed now and pay later at safelight.com.
SafeLight Repair, SafeLight Replace.
If you have tried multiple oral antidepressants and they haven't worked,
I was 20 when I headed out to the hills past Elbridge with two guys I'd known since high school. It was one of those last-minute, half-planned weekends. We'd heard about this stretch of road called Jasper Hollow from some guy at a gas station who swore it was cursed. Not in the ghost jumps out at you kind of way. More like stories passed around in low voices. People vanishing, messed up accidents, voices from the trees at night. We thought it sounded like small-town nonsense, but it was just the kind of nonsense we liked. The road was maybe 40 minutes from where we lived, tucked out past the old canning plant, behind a warehouse that had been boarded up for years. By the time we got there, it was a little after 2 in the morning. None of us had really expected it to feel creepy. But the road ended so abruptly it looked like someone had taken a blowtorch to it. Pavement just stopped and gave way to cracked gravel and tall weeds. Like nature had chewed it up and spat it out. We parked on the shoulder where what was left of a rusted guardrail curved around into a dry canal. There was a sign, barely legible, slumped sideways. The lettering was so faded it might have been blank for all it mattered. The orange trees stretched out on both sides in tight, orderly rows, but they looked somehow too straight, like someone had laid them down with a ruler and then abandoned them halfway through pruning. We left the headlights on, which lit up the first few rows of trees. Didn't seem like we'd get in trouble, no houses nearby, and the radio still had signal, so we figured we weren't that far out. We popped the cooler, sat on the railing, and started drinking. Oliver had brought those cheap store-brand beers that taste like aluminum and regret, but none of us cared. We were just there to kill time and scare each other with dumb stories. At first, that's all it was. Mason tried to convince us he saw a coyote in the orchard. Oliver dared me to climb the canal fencing, which I did until I realized the metal was slick with something sticky that smelled faintly like oil. We tossed rocks at a rusted pipe sticking out of the ground, laughing every time we missed by a mile. But the whole time, I kept glancing back at the car. It started as just a habit. I'd look over my shoulder checking to see it was still there. But it always looked farther away. Not a ton. Just enough to make my brain catch on it. The distance between where we sat and the car felt like it kept growing by a few feet every time I blinked. Once I walked toward it just to check. It felt normal again when I got close. But when I turned around, the guys looked like they were twice as far away as before. I shook it off. Figured it was the dart messing with my depth perception. Then Oliver went quiet mid-sentence and turned his head. "You hear that?" Mason and I both froze. But all I heard was the soft drone of the radio. He said it sounded like tires, crunching slowly over gravel, but no headlights, no engine. Nothing but that weird, deliberate sound he swore he heard. We listened for another minute, then shrugged it off. Maybe an animal, maybe nothing. We were about to pack it in when a man stepped out from between the trees, not from the road, from inside the orchard. Just appeared between 2 rows and kept walking like he'd been following a path we couldn't see. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wore this old jacket that hung weird on him, too tight around the elbows. His pants flared slightly at the bottom, like something out of a department store catalog from the 70s. He didn't look at us, just walked right through like we weren't there, until he slammed his shoulder into Mason, knocking his beer into his lap. We all stood up. Mason cursed, shoved him, told him to watch it. The guy stumbled back a step, then looked at us for the first time. His face didn't register anything. Not surprise, not anger, not even recognition. Just blank. I stepped forward, trying to read him. And for a second, I swear I saw something close to fear. Just a flicker. That was enough to piss me off. I don't know why. I shoved him again, harder, told him to back off or swing. He didn't. Just stared for a beat, then muttered something. I'll come back with mine. Not my friends, not my people. Just that one word, mine. We laughed. It was ridiculous. He looked like someone who'd wandered off from a county fair, not some kind of threat. He disappeared the same way he came into the trees. We didn't follow. Didn't think about it. Just went back to drinking. Time passed. The temperature dropped, enough that I noticed my breath when I laughed. The radio started cutting in and out, the music thinning like someone was messing with the antenna. We were talking again, back to normal, when something cracked against the side of my skull. I saw white. Fell sideways. Didn't even get a chance to register it. Then another hit landed, square on the back of my neck, and I dropped. Didn't black out. But I was on the ground, dizzy. Then I felt the cold press of metal on my temple. A gun. There's no mistaking that shape when it's right against your skin. I looked up slowly, and there he was. Same guy. Only now he wasn't alone. There were maybe a dozen men behind him, standing in a line just at the edge of the orchard. But they didn't look real. Not exactly. They stood too still. No one shifted, no one adjusted their stance. They didn't even seem to be breathing. Their eyes locked on me, every one of them. The guy with the gun cocked it, slow, deliberate. Then he started talking. Word for word, he repeated everything I'd said to him earlier. Every insult, every challenge. He said it all back to me, with this dry, uneven laugh under his breath that didn't match the tone of anything. Like he was mocking the shape of the words more than the words themselves. Then he told me to say it again. The name I'd called him. He waited. Gun still pressed against my head. And I did it. I shouted it, voice cracking, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself. That's when the group behind him broke out laughing, all at once. But it wasn't normal laughter. It sounded layered, wrong. Like it was one laugh split into different bodies. Not synchronized, just chopped up, echoing weird off the trees. Then, without warning, the man dropped his arm, turned his back, and started walking. The others followed. Not walking, exactly. More like sliding through the dirt. Their legs moved, but not quite right. Their torsos didn't sway. They just receded. Back into the orchard. The laughter faded with them, thinning out into silence. I stayed down for a while, didn't move. Didn't breathe deep. When I finally looked up, the trees were still again. No sign of movement, no shapes, no sound except the distant warble of the radio. I stood slowly. The car sat exactly where it had been, but Oliver and Mason were gone. No signs of struggle, no blood. Just gone. I didn't call their names, didn't want to. The idea of my voice carrying into those trees made my skin crawl. I climbed into the car, turned the key, and drove. Didn't even check the mirrors. Made it 5 miles to a gas station before I realized I was still holding the wheel like it might bite me. I didn't go home that night. I drove to my cousin's place in Auburn and crashed on the couch without explaining a thing. The next morning I tried calling them. Both lines went straight to voicemail. By the afternoon, they were disconnected. I drove to their apartments. Oliver's place was empty. Mailbox crammed with flyers like no one had been home in weeks. Mason's landlord said the unit had never been rented under that name. Went to the garage where Oliver worked on weekends. Owner said he didn't know who I was talking about. I asked around town. No one remembered them. Not even at the bar we'd gone to almost every Friday for 2 years. It was like they'd been lifted out of the world and scrubbed clean. I moved out of Elbridge within the week. Haven't been back. My cousin Ezra had this weird obsession with obscure folklore. Not ghosts or haunted houses. He didn't care about that stuff. He liked the lesser-known things, the ones most people hadn't heard of. So when he brought up the Dark Watchers, I barely even reacted. I think I was halfway through a sandwich when he mentioned them, and I just nodded, figuring he was talking about some random Reddit thread again. But a few days later, he texted me asking if I wanted to drive out to the San Mateo Range to hike the trails where the sightings supposedly happened. Said it would be a cool winter break thing, a chance to clear our heads before school started back up. He even offered to cover gas, which, considering I was broke at the time, was honestly the main reason I said yes. That and boredom. I didn't have anything else going on. We left early afternoon. It wasn't a long drive, maybe 2 hours, and we didn't talk much on the way. Mostly just the usual stuff. Music, random updates on people we knew, and him rehashing the legends. According to Ezra, the Watchers were these shadowy figures people had reported seeing for decades, just standing on mountain ridges, watching silently. They never moved, never chased anyone.
To everyone who believes in Midwest magic, you'll always find it here at Culver's.
Midwest Magic transports.
Just stood there. It sounded like nonsense, but I figured the hike itself would at least be decent. By late afternoon, we were at this turnout along a stretch of forest road. Nothing official, just a gravel patch someone had clearly used before. We parked and grabbed our stuff. Ezra had a light pack with snacks and water. I just clipped my flashlight to my belt. The air was crisp but not cold, and the sky was starting to tip into that golden late-day color. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but that didn't register yet. The trail wasn't marked. It looked like something old, just a narrow dirt path cut into the side of the slope, threading between dry brush and low trees. The view was pretty, and for the first half hour, it felt like any other hike. We took our time. Ezra kept stopping to snap pictures, mostly of rocks or animal tracks, and once, a hawk circling above us. Eventually, I checked the time and told him we should probably turn back soon. He gave me the usual, just a little farther routine. Said there was supposed to be a ridge with a better view around the bend. I agreed, more out of laziness than curiosity. We rounded the curve, and that's when Ezra stopped dead. He didn't say anything, just froze and raised his arm. I followed his line of sight and saw it too. A figure, standing alone up on the ridgeline. It was so still that for a second I thought it might be a tree or a weird-shaped rock. But no, it had a definite human shape. Tall, thin arms slightly out from the sides like it was holding something invisible. There were no features. No face, no clothes, no color. Just a dark outline against the pale sky. I waited for Ezra to laugh or say something dumb, but he didn't. He just kept staring. Eventually, he pulled out his phone and tried to zoom in. The screen flickered, then filled with static. Not just blurry actual static, like a broken TV channel. That freaked me out more than the figure did. Phones don't do that. He lowered it and looked at me, clearly rattled. I tried to stay calm, told him it had to be a hiker, but the thing was way too tall to be a normal person, and it hadn't moved at all. We kept walking. Neither of us said anything for the next few minutes. We tried to act like nothing had happened, just kept our heads down and moved forward. Eventually we rounded another bend, and I couldn't help glancing back. It was gone. Not walked away, gone, just no longer there. The ridge was empty. I told myself maybe it had ducked behind something. Ezra shook his head. He said it didn't walk away. It had just disappeared. Like someone turned it off. The trail dropped down into a ravine. The walls on either side closed in, and the light disappeared fast. It felt colder all of a sudden. Sharp, but not like normal cold. Like the air had been drained out of the space. Then Ezra stopped again. There were footprints on the path ahead of us. 2 sets. One was mine. The other matched his exactly. We checked. Same tread, same wear pattern, same distance between steps. The problem was, we hadn't gone through the ravine yet. We were seeing our own footprints ahead of us. Ezra tried to laugh it off, said maybe someone else had the same boots, but even he didn't believe that. We both stood there for a while, staring at the prints like they might do something. Eventually, he said we should keep going, just to see how far they went. The deeper we walked, the worse the air felt. Heavy, like it didn't want us there. Each step felt slower, like we were pushing against something invisible. I turned on my flashlight. The beam lit up the walls of the ravine, catching patches of moss and old roots. Then it landed on something just ahead. Another figure, standing right in the path, maybe 15 feet away. Same height, same stillness, same blank shape. The beam hit it directly, but no detail showed. It didn't reflect light, it just absorbed it. I shouted, asked who was there. No response. Ezra stepped forward, and I instinctively reached out and grabbed his arm. He stopped, thank God. Right then, the figure slid sideways into the rock wall. No turn, no sound. It was like the wall opened and took it in. We didn't wait around, we turned back. Walked fast, almost jogging. But something was off. The trail didn't match what we remembered. There were curves where there hadn't been. Large boulders were missing. At one point, we passed a tree stump we'd definitely seen before, but it was on the wrong side of the path now. The whole trail felt like it was shifting behind us. Then my flashlight started flickering. Not a soft fade, a sharp, erratic pulse. I smacked it a couple times, but nothing helped. Brand new batteries too. The silence was awful. Even our footsteps sounded muted, like the air didn't want to carry the sound. I tried talking again, just to hear something human. But my voice came out flat, like it was being swallowed. Ezra didn't say a word, just kept walking, checking behind us every few seconds. Then we saw it. The ridge where the first figure had been. Only now, there were 2, side by side, unmoving, watching us from above. Identical shapes, no faces, no movement, just standing there. We didn't stop. Didn't even look at each other. We ran, didn't speak until we saw the car. As soon as we got inside and shut the doors, the pressure lifted. The air felt normal again, like waking up from being underwater. I started the car and we pulled out fast. Neither of us looked back. We were halfway to the highway before Ezra finally spoke. His voice was barely audible. He asked if I'd noticed the footprint still in front of us when we ran. I had, but I didn't want to talk about it. We've never gone back. Ezra deleted every picture from the trip the next morning. Didn't even hesitate. I asked why and he just said, they weren't ours. The only thing I kept was the flashlight. I was 15 when my uncle asked if I wanted to spend the summer with him in a town called Mirador, out in the Salinas Valley. He managed irrigation for a bunch of farms in the area, which meant long shifts and weird hours. So most days, it was just me and my cousin Leo, left to wander the valley and kill time however we could. The drive up from Los Angeles was long and hot, and somewhere near Paso Robles, he started telling stories to keep me from nodding off in the truck. A lot of them were the usual California ghost stuff, mission hauntings, old miners, a cursed stretch of highway that eats tires. But there was one that actually stuck with me. He said there was this woman, not La Llorona, not the crying mother everyone knows, but something older. This one didn't cry, didn't talk. She was supposed to belong to the dry riverbed that cuts through the valley. He said you could find her out there on the back roads after dark, especially near an old concrete bridge the workers just called the South Span. He told me she was tall, too tall. Said her head scraped low-hanging branches and her hair dragged behind her, long enough to sweep the dirt. And he said she had this thing about windows. She'd just stand there watching, not blinking, just staring. Then he gave me this look like he was half joking and half serious and told me not to go near that bridge after sunset. Naturally, I laughed. I was from the city, where legends are just, well, Halloween props and bad YouTube videos. But the bridge was just a 10-minute bike ride from the house, and the more time I spent nearby, the harder it was to ignore. It didn't look like much, just cracked concrete arches tagged with layers of faded graffiti. Underneath the middle span, someone had painted a name, maybe 20 years old by the look of it, but still weirdly clear. The letters curled up, like they'd melted against gravity. Leo said it was the name of a girl who disappeared in a flood way back, but didn't know much else. Nobody did. The name looked almost recent, like someone had gone out of their way to keep it from fading. You could still see flecks of black paint where it had pooled thickest. It just sat there, under the bridge, like it was waiting to be said. Third week in, one of those slow evenings hit, the kind where the sky's dark, but the heat's still hanging in the air, and we got bored enough to test the story. We grabbed flashlights and bikes and pedaled out there, stopping right in the center of the bridge. We said the name, just once, out loud, like it was a joke, like a dare. Then we waited. No rustling, no footsteps, no ghostly howl, nothing. We stood there for maybe 5 minutes trying not to laugh, then hopped back on our bikes and raced each other home. For a second, it actually felt kind of silly, but I couldn't sleep that night. The name kept bouncing around in my head like a song stuck on repeat. I was lying there staring at the ceiling in the guest room when I felt this little tremor run under the mattress. Barely there, like a cat had jumped up, except we didn't have a cat. I almost brushed it off. Then the doorknob clicked twice. Soft, too soft, too soft, like someone outside was gently testing it. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. But nothing else happened. I just lay there, eyes wide open, until the light started seeping in through the curtains. Next morning, I asked Leo if he'd come to my room. He just looked confused and said no. That evening, I was clearing plates from the kitchen when I caught a flash of something in the window. Not outside, inside the reflection. It was a woman's back. You couldn't see her face, just the sheet of hair hanging down, long enough to blur her arms. I turned around so fast I nearly dropped the plate, but the room was empty. Whatever I saw, it was taller than anyone in that house. After that, she started showing up more often. I was riding my bike through the orchard lanes when I saw her between the rows, dead still, towering above the trees. Her hair moved like it caught a breeze, but the air was perfectly still. I blinked, and she was gone. Another time, I walked past Leo's room and thought I saw someone inside, undressing in front of the mirror. which didn't make sense because Leo was outside throwing a tennis ball for the dogs. I pushed the door open ready to mess with him, but the room was cold and completely empty. The nights got worse. One night, I woke up to this pressure at the foot of my bed. Not the weight of someone sitting, but something heavier, like someone crouching there, leaning forward. When I looked, I saw her, crouched, huge. Her head almost touched the ceiling, and her hair poured down like curtains on both sides of the bed. I couldn't move. The mattress compressed deeper under invisible weight. Then, from underneath me, beneath the bed, I heard this high, warped cry. Like a little kid trying to scream underwater, it twisted into a low, rasping laugh that I could feel in my ribs. I don't know how I did it, but I forced myself upright. And just like that, it all stopped. The room was dead quiet again, except for my heart hammering in my ears. Another time, when both my uncle and Leo were out late, maybe grocery store, maybe fixing something on a field, I was in the living room trying to read. The front door started rattling like someone was kicking it from outside. The knob twisted back and forth hard, like whoever it was trying to force it open. I didn't hear footsteps, no voices, no shadows passing across the curtains, just the door shaking in its frame. I pressed my back to the wall, book still in my hands like that was going to help, and just stared at the door until it stopped. Stopped exactly the moment I heard my uncle's truck rumble into the driveway. That was the last straw. I told him everything. He didn't look surprised. He just sighed and said, yeah, some of the guys who worked the fields had mentioned her too. Said they saw a tall woman after dusk moving through the rows, always facing away, always leaving before they could see her face. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. That name on the bridge? It was supposed to hold her there. Saying it out loud unanchored her. He said it like it was a fact, not a theory. Just something everybody knew and didn't talk about. I asked him why no one painted over it or tried to seal it. He just said people had tried. Paint wouldn't stick. Concrete wouldn't set. Somehow, the name always came back. After that, I stayed away from the bridge. I stopped saying the name. Stopped reacting when I heard clicks in the night or felt little tremors under the bed. I didn't even look out windows after sunset. Just kept the blinds down and my head low. It was hard, but I didn't give her anything to work with. And slowly, it was like she just weakened. The door stopped rattling, the footsteps faded, the dreams went quiet. By the time summer ended and I packed up for home, the house felt normal again. Quiet, but the memory's still sharp. It's one of those things that never really fades. People think California is just sunshine and traffic. But there are old things out there too, patient ones, and some of them are just waiting for someone dumb enough to call their name.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words,
It was that weird time right after finishing my first year at Red Pine Community College, where everything felt sort of suspended. Not quite real life yet, but not high school either. Classes were done, my part-time job at the pharmacy had cut my hours, and my brain just kept spinning in this restless, low-grade hum. I didn't want to sit around that summer. Didn't want to waste 3 months playing video games, or eating cereal straight out of the box at 2 in the morning. I needed to move, to go somewhere else for a bit. 2 of my closest friends, Jonas and Theo, felt the same. We'd been talking about getting out of town for months, but like most things we planned, it started as a joke. Then it wasn't. Jonas had this old Hyundai Elantra with mismatched doors and a cassette player that only worked if you smacked it first. We pooled together what little cash we had, mostly tips and leftover graduation money, grabbed a cooler, a bunch of gas station snacks, and 1 sleeping bag each. The plan was simple. Drive west, see what happens. California had a kind of gravity to it for us. It felt like something was always going on out there. Celebrities, earthquakes, cults, UFO sightings in the desert. Not just the coast and palm trees, but the stories too. The kind of weird, impossible stuff people tell around bonfires when they think no one's really listening. We figured if anyone was going to stumble into that kind of thing, it'd be us. Not because we were brave or anything. Just dumb enough not to rule it out. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. Sleeping in parking lots when we couldn't afford a motel, eating terrible microwave burritos, stopping at every roadside attraction that looked even remotely cursed. We drove through endless fields, flat as a sheet of paper, where the only thing taller than the grass was the occasional busted windmill. Jonas had made a playlist called Road Trip of Chaos, and it was a mix of ska, movie scores, and one surprisingly emotional Enya track. By the time we hit the California state line, the heat was starting to mess with our moods. Everything took more effort. Our jokes got lazier. We argued over dumb things like which gas station jerky brand was least horrible. Then, outside a dusty town called Ashfield, we stopped to fuel up. The station looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 80s. One of those places where you have to go inside to pay, and the air smells like warm rubber and old oil. I went in to grab water and pay for the gas while the other two stretched outside. That's when I met him, the old guy behind the counter. Long gray hair, sunburned face, a faded Ashfield high baseball cap pulled low. He was polite enough, grunted a hello, rang me up. But while I was waiting for the receipt, he must have overheard me on the phone with Jonas, still debating whether we should head down through San Moreno or try for the coast. The guy looked up, pointed a grimy finger toward the west wall of windows and said, "There's an old road that cuts through the hills, shaves off an hour. Harrow Creek Road." I'd never heard of it, but that didn't mean much. He slid a pen across the counter and pointed to a laminated map pinned on the wall behind him. Drew a line with slow, deliberate motions. "You'll see a green sign," he said. "Turn there." Then, as I picked up the receipt, he added, almost too casually, "If someone weighs you down on that road, don't stop. Doesn't matter who they are. Just drive." He said it like he'd said it before, maybe too many times. I waited for a grin, some kind of punchline, but there wasn't one. Just him looking at me like he already knew I'd slow down anyway. Back in the car, I told Jonas and Theo. They laughed, obviously. Theo did this bit where he pretended to be a haunted hitchhiker. "You forgot me, Ryan. You said we'd go to prom together." We laughed it off, because what else do you do? But that weird offhand warning stuck with me longer than I expected. We hit Harrow Creek Road just as the sun was bleeding out behind the hills. There was the sign, just like he said, green, faded, bent slightly like someone had sideswiped it years ago. The pavement changed right away, more gravel than asphalt. The whole car rattled like it might shake itself apart. Jonas was still driving then, hunched over the wheel, squinting through his sunglasses, even though the light was basically gone. Theo passed out first, curled up in the back seat, arms crossed, mouth open. Jonas lasted maybe another 40 minutes before giving up. I took over while they both snored like they were auditioning for a cartoon. That's when things got weird. First, the gas gauge didn't move, at all. I kept checking it every few minutes, trying to remind myself that it was probably broken or stuck. But still, it hadn't dipped even a millimeter. We'd been driving for what felt like over an hour, uphill, winding through sharp turns. No way we weren't burning fuel. Then I started seeing the same road marker, a dented steel sign for Harrow Creek, 3 miles. Except I passed it again. And again. Same rust patch. Same scratch that looked like someone had tried to carve a name into it. At first I slowed down, thinking maybe we'd missed a turn or somehow looped back. But there were no intersections, no forks. Just the same road ahead, like we were being rerouted in a loop that didn't want to let us out. And then I saw her, just off the right shoulder, still almost statuesque. She wasn't walking or pacing, just standing, watching. Her dress caught my eye first. It was pale blue, the kind of thing someone might wear to a summer wedding or a church picnic decades ago. Delicate, but out of place. Her hair was dark and neatly cut just below her ears, not messy or wild like you'd expect from someone stranded in the desert. She raised a hand in a small, casual wave. Not desperate, not urgent, just familiar. I should have kept going. Everything in me said not to stop, but I slowed down anyway. She walked up to the window like she already knew I would, no hesitation. She leaned in close enough for me to see the faintest freckle under her left eye, and she said my name. Not a guess, not a question. She said it the way someone says it when they've known you your whole life. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My mouth was dry, and my grip on the wheel was too tight. She smiled, gently tilted her head, and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I managed to shake my head. She didn't look upset, more like amused. Like this was part of the game. She started listing off memories, things I had never done. Playing hooky, going to the old lake near her dad's cabin, watching fireworks from the high school roof, each one more vivid than the last, and somehow each one felt just close enough to maybe be real. Like, maybe I had forgotten a whole life and she was just helping me fill it back in. I asked her how she knew me. That was when something in her face changed. Not anger, just something tight. "You promised you wouldn't forget," she said. "We grew up together." Her voice didn't rise, didn't crack. It was calm, but there was something in it that made my skin feel too tight. In the back seat, Theo stirred. I heard him mumble something and shift positions. For a split second, I thought about unlocking the door and letting her in, letting her explain whatever this was, like it would make more sense with witnesses. But something deep down said that if she got into that car, I wouldn't make it out of those hills. So I lied. Told her we were low on gas, that we couldn't take her with us. The light behind her eyes just turned off. No anger, no sadness, just gone. She took a step back. I blinked, and she vanished. Not walked away, not ran. Just wasn't there anymore. I hit the gas so hard my foot cramped. The car fishtailed a little, gravel spitting in every direction, but I kept going, didn't look back, didn't speak. The road dragged on longer than it had any right to. It felt like we were caught in some loop, like no matter how far we drove, we weren't moving forward. But eventually, finally, the road spit us out onto a real highway. Bright signs, glowing billboards, streetlights that looked like salvation. Both Jonas and Theo were awake now, asking what the hell was going on, why I was driving like someone was chasing us. I told them we'd taken a wrong turn, that I wanted to make up for lost time. They didn't buy it, but they let it go. My hands didn't stop shaking until we reached San Moreno. Weeks later, I was back home. One of those humid nights where sleep doesn't come easy and everything feels a little sideways. I found myself thinking about her again, about how she said my name. So I grabbed my laptop and pulled up a few old forums I used to scroll through for weird folklore, searched for Harrow Creek Ghost. Didn't expect much.
Siggy's. Less sets you free.
When your kid is hurting and there's nothing you can do about it.
But I found it, buried in a thread called Desert Roads That Shouldn't Exist. Harrow Creek Hitcher appears to lone travelers at night, greets you by name, shares false memories, believed to be seeking someone to step into her missing life. Those who stop and let her in are never seen again. Vehicle disappears without a trace. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I don't know what she was or why she picked me. I don't know how she knew my name or why everything she said felt like it belonged to someone I used to be. But I know this. If anyone ever waves at me on a quiet road again, I won't stop. I'm 29 years old. Spent a week driving through Northern California last fall. Not for anything special, just needed a break from my job and the city noise. Wanted to be somewhere I could sleep under trees and forget what email sounded like. I stuck to the back roads, not on purpose at first, just kind of ended up that way. The GPS kept trying to reroute me to the main highways, but I'd see these narrow spurs cutting off into the hills, or little signs pointing toward beaches with names I didn't recognize, and I'd veer off just to see where they went. Turned out, most of those roads led into places that felt half forgotten. Little towns with boarded up diners and hand-painted store signs, or stretches of forest so thick the sunlight barely touched the ground. The redwoods were everywhere. Massive, quiet, older than anything I'd ever been around. And everyone I met, the gas station guys, the woman running the campground, the old couple I shared a fire pit with one night, they all had stories. Not just the usual "I saw a bear once" kind of thing. These were strange, layered tales about things happening deeper in the woods. Old rituals, groups that met under full moons, symbols carved into tree trunks that weren't from any alphabet people could name, and always told like an afterthought, like they weren't warning me, but also, maybe they were. I didn't go up there chasing folklore or ghost stories. I just liked solitude, camp coffee, and the sound of wheels on dirt. I had my mountain bike with me, my sleeping gear, a cooler, and a vague idea of moving south along the coast over the week. But the deeper I got, the more the weird stuff started to pile up. Little things at first. I'd find odd bundles hanging in trees near campsites, twine holding feathers or coins. I'd hear what sounded like laughter in the woods, late at night, but distant, not quite echoing like normal. I'd chalked most of it up to tiredness or imagination. But on the second day, I followed a dirt road up into one of the denser stretches of forest. No signs, just a pull-out and a gate that had been left open. I parked the car, unloaded the bike, and started riding. The trail was wide at first, rutted and dry, probably used by hunters or logging trucks back in the day. But within 5 minutes, the trees had thickened into walls, and I was riding inside this long green tunnel. Everything felt muffled. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of my tires and the occasional creak from the trees. That's when I saw the first strip of fabric, tied to a branch about head height. Frayed and sun-bleached, but still knotted tightly. I figured it was a trail marker, maybe something from a local hiker group or a signal for fire crews. But then I saw another one, exactly 20 feet later. Same size, same type of cloth, same height. Then another, and another, perfectly spaced all the way down the trail. That's when I stopped, got off the bike, checked one up close. The knot was oddly precise, not the kind of sloppy bow someone ties without thinking. And underneath the tree, someone had laid out small round stones in a spiral. It was nearly 4 feet across, flat in the dirt, each stone spaced evenly apart, forming a shape that widened out like a shell. It wasn't random. It felt studied. I crouched there for a long minute, staring at it, took a breath, then got back on the bike and kept going, partly out of curiosity, partly because something about it felt like a breadcrumb trail I wasn't supposed to follow, which made me want to follow it more. About half a mile later, I saw another stone formation, this time a circle with straight lines cutting through it like a wheel. It was cleaner, more geometric. Next to it, carved into the bark of one of the taller redwoods, was a set of jagged letters. They were long and angular, not quite symmetrical, with no real pattern I could decipher. Not English, not anything close. Whatever they meant, they'd been hacked deep into the wood with something sharp. Still looked fresh. Some of the bark had curled inward, but the exposed layers hadn't darkened yet. That was the first moment I felt like I'd crossed a line I couldn't see. Kept going anyway. The trail finally climbed out of the trees and opened into a ridge. Not a natural clearing. Someone had cut the trees down long ago. Probably for logging, maybe for something else. The stumps were old, but still there. That's when I noticed the cars, 3 of them, parked off in the brush. Not wrecks, not abandoned, just dusty, tucked away like someone didn't want them seen from the road. Each one had some kind of decoration. Dream catchers on mirrors. Beads looped over headrests. One had feathers twisted into the windshield wipers. And none of them had people inside. Windows cracked just slightly. Everything eerily still. That's when I heard the voices. Not yelling. Just conversation. Soft, uneven, like a group speaking without rhythm or direction, coming from deeper in the trees. I left the bike hidden in the ferns and crept forward. I didn't really have a plan, just that tug of curiosity again. I found a break in the branches and looked through. A group of maybe 7 or 8 people were working in the middle of the clearing. They'd built a low wooden frame from bent branches, like a hut, but flatter and lower, maybe 4 feet tall, with a wide base. Blankets had been laid out. There were small fires, not lit yet. Bundles of sticks arranged in circles. And not a single person spoke. They were moving in complete silence now, passing objects, stacking logs. One man walked toward the edge of the clearing with more firewood. He saw me, didn't look surprised, just nodded once. He had a gray beard, long, thin arms, and was wearing these deep maroon robes, loose, flowing, not something you wear to go hiking. I said hello. His voice was low, polite, completely flat. He didn't ask what I was doing there, didn't smile, just answered me like he had to, and then kept walking. The rest of the group never looked up. I stood there a few seconds longer, waiting for someone to acknowledge me. No one did. They just kept working, hands moving in synchronized silence. Whatever they were doing, I wasn't supposed to be part of it. I turned and walked fast back to the bike. Didn't run, but I didn't linger either. Rode back to the car, every crunch of gravel under the tires suddenly way too loud. I camped in a public lot that night next to a ranger station. Didn't sleep much, kept playing it over in my head. The formation, the bone-deep silence, the guy's eyes. I tried to tell myself it was a reenactment or a spiritual retreat, some niche ritual group doing their thing in the woods. But none of it explained the symbols, or the spiral stones, or why it felt like I wasn't just an outsider. I was an intruder. Next morning, I went back. Yeah, I know, stupid. But I couldn't stop thinking about it.
They're having fun? Is it because they booked a new vacation package that made it easy to change and rearrange?
I had to see it again in daylight when it felt less like a fever dream. When I got to the ridge, everything was different. The cars were gone. The clearing was quiet. The wooden frame had collapsed inward, like something heavy had pushed down on it. Edges were charred, just lightly, like they'd tried to burn it but changed their minds halfway through. And hanging from the broken poles were little cloth pouches, maybe a dozen of them, tied off with bright thread, each one bulging slightly like something was inside. I didn't touch them, didn't even get close. Circles had been drawn into the dirt all around the clearing, layered, spiraling, some crossing over themselves, almost like someone had dragged a stick while pacing in a trance. At the far edge of the clearing, on a wide, flat stump, something had been left behind. A piece of bone. Big. Bigger than my hand. Set upright, perfectly balanced, like it was meant to be noticed but not touched. I froze, stared at it, and for a second, I thought I could hear something. A kind of faint humming. Could have been my own pulse. Could have been nothing. Either way, I backed up slow. Didn't turn around until I was near the trees. Got on the bike. Rode harder than I ever had in my life. Didn't stop until I saw the car. Didn't breathe right until I hit pavement again. That was it for the trip. I drove straight out of the county. Didn't sleep in the woods again. Didn't take any more back roads. A bunch of us had rented this old ranch house out near a place called Ryers Hollow for my buddy Mason's birthday weekend. We'd heard about it through a friend of a friend who swore it was a steel big place. Tons of land, cheap rates. There was a reason for that apparently. Locals had a name for it, Teller's End. You know that feeling when someone says something that sounds like it belongs in a campfire story? That's how it sounded to us. Teller's End. No one could agree on why it was called that. Some said it used to be a stagecoach stop back in the day where a guy named Teller got ambushed. Others claimed it was built over some lost mining trail where entire crews disappeared. One woman at the gas station even told Jonah, dead serious, that it was on a path settlers used to take when they were ready to vanish. Not abandon. Vanish. Naturally, we laughed. We weren't there for legends. There were 8 of us total, mostly college friends, with a couple of plus ones and old roommates mixed in. It was a weekend meant for being loud and stupid and drunk in the middle of nowhere. Classic, we're still young kind of thing. The house was massive. One of those long, low ranch-style homes with weirdly high ceilings and furniture that looked like it hadn't moved since the early 90s. Half the cabinets were empty. The fridge smelled like stale coffee grounds, but the beds were clean, the water was hot, and there was this giant backyard with a fire pit and no neighbors for miles. Perfect. Mason and I ended up sharing the master bedroom. We were close, had been since sophomore year. He wasn't a tall guy, just solid. Like if a fridge learned how to throw a football. His build made you think twice before play fighting with him, even as a joke. He had a calm way about him though. Rarely raised his voice, didn't rattle easily. That's probably why what happened hit so hard. His old roommate Jonah came too. I didn't know Jonah well, but he came with this restless energy, always bouncing one leg, always cracking his knuckles or whistling without realizing it. Shorter than both of us, with this kind of thick-limbed, compact build you see in wrestlers and lacrosse players. From the moment we got there, Jonah was messing with stuff. Rearranging chairs for feng shui, trying to fix the loose gate hinge with a butter knife, setting traps to scare people when they went to the bathroom. That first night, we lit up the fire pit around 10. It was chilly out, but not cold enough to need a jacket. Just enough to make the beer feel colder going down. Someone passed around a Bluetooth speaker, and someone else found this binder the host had left in the kitchen. Inside were printed pages of house rules, emergency contacts, and a local legend. Jonah read it out loud in this fake dramatic voice. It said the property used to belong to a gold prospector who built a well. But it wasn't just any well. According to the story, it moved. like literally move from place to place on the land. Sometimes it'd show up outside a guest bedroom window, sometimes near the tree line. Some visitors claimed they saw it late at night, plain as day. But the next morning, there'd be nothing but grass or dirt where it should have been. We joked about it all night. Someone shouted, "Watch out for the well," every time someone walked off to pee in the dark. Mason was a few beers past his limit by then. He kept leaning back in his chair and wobbling like he was about to tip over, grinning like a kid testing gravity. Jonah passed around a few edibles he'd brought in a metal Altoids tin. Said they were light. They weren't. Around midnight, the two of them wandered off into the field behind the house. Just disappeared into the dark like it was no big deal. They were laughing and pushing each other, holding solo cups and cracking up at something only they understood. I stayed back, went inside, flopped onto the bed, and FaceTimed my girlfriend. We'd been talking maybe 10 minutes when I heard a knock at the bedroom door. Just one. I ignored it. Could have been anyone. Then another knock, harder this time. Right after that, the doorknob turned. No warning. Just opened. Mason and Jonah walked in, looking like they'd gone through something. Mason's shirt was streaked with mud. His arms had these thin scratches on them, like thorns maybe, or barbed wire. He was walking like his limbs were too heavy, like he had to think about each step. Jonah looked like he'd been rolling on the ground. Grass stains on his knees, still laughing, still trying to joke, but his voice was a little higher than before. Mason leaned into me like he was about to fall over. I reached out instinctively, thinking he was going to crash, but then he stood straight. Something changed in his face. His head tilted, just a little, like he was trying to figure out what he was looking at. And then everything just went blank, expressionless, like I wasn't even there. Then he shoved me hard, sent me stumbling back into the dresser. I laughed, thought he was playing. That laugh died quick when he wrapped his hand around my throat. Tight, no warning, just pressure. Instant. I couldn't breathe. I said his name, or tried to. Jonah froze for a second, then jumped in, trying to pull Mason off me. But Mason didn't flinch, didn't blink. His eyes just kept staring straight into mine, unblinking, like he was watching a screen. I clawed at his wrist, but I couldn't budge it. Jonah wedged himself between us, shoved Mason back with both arms. I dropped to the floor, coughing, gasping, but I barely had time to breathe before Mason lunged again. This time he wrapped his arm around my neck from behind. I felt everything go narrow, like a tunnel. I screamed barely. Jonah yanked at him again, but Mason's grip was ridiculous, like something had multiplied his strength. I scrambled back toward the dresser and grabbed whatever I could. Turned out to be the little pocket knife I'd unpacked earlier. I flicked it open and held it up. Mason's eyes flickered. Just for a second, a crack of recognition. I shouted at him to stop, to leave, to back off. Jonah told me to put the knife down. I did. I really thought maybe that moment of clarity had passed through him, but then he lunged again. So I tackled him. My shoulder hit him right in the ribs. We crashed into the hallway wall. Lamp fell. Something shattered. Jonah jumped in, and together we pushed him bit by bit through the house, past the kitchen, into the living room. Mason grabbed a half-empty bottle of Mountain Dew and just poured it over my head. No expression. No reason. Sticky soda ran into my eyes and ears. I slipped, banged my elbow against the floor so hard it went numb. He let out one sharp laugh, just a single bark. Then, nothing again, blank face. Jonah took him down from the side. We both grabbed Mason by the arms and legs and dragged him toward the front door. Opened it, shoved him out, locked it. He started pounding on it immediately, screaming my name, yelling about how I was a coward. Then, silence. Total silence. Total silence. Except for this low breathing sound right under the door crack. Then he started whispering. At first it was too low to understand. Then came the words. "Tell her about the well," he said. Clear. Measured. Jonah stared at me. I stared back. We both knew we hadn't said a word to him about the well all night. There was no reason he should have brought that up. "Tell her about the well," he repeated louder. Then silence again. I peeked through the side window. He wasn't banging anymore. Just standing, still as stone, arms by his sides, eyes straight ahead. I asked Jonah if they'd seen anything weird out there. He He hesitated, then nodded. Said there was a weird stone circle, maybe 30 feet out, looked like the top of a well kind of, but filled in with dirt. No depth, just a ring of old mossy rocks and soil. Mason had stared into it for a long time. Jonas said he tried to talk to him, but Mason wasn't responding. Then he said, Mason started speaking, but not in his own voice. That's when I told my girlfriend to call the sheriff. She did. 2 deputies showed up about 10 minutes later. Headlights cut across the porch. Mason didn't run, didn't argue, just sat down on the steps, calm, waiting. Didn't say a single word, didn't look at us. They took him in for observation. He's out now. We don't talk. No one does. It's never just a story when you're the one inside it.
I'm gonna give you this designer bag if you can prove
Oh man, that was a really long one, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. If you stuck around for this long, and I will be back tomorrow for another episode. Hopefully you guys have a fantastic autumn/fall, and if you celebrate Halloween, happy October. And yeah,